Can anyone hear me? Testing, testing. We'll wait just a few minutes. Maybe someone else will join. Of course, this is be left on YouTube for prosperity, so anyone can see it whenever they want. Volume is low, maybe just talking. Oh. I think it's just me talking softly. How about now? Can you hear me now better? Also keep in mind I'm talking on just Apple's headphones with a mic. Don't have any high-end streaming software or accessories. Okay, cool. So, like I said, this is I won't say an introduction, but it's just like a small project, not even a real fully fledged app, on how to implement protocol oriented programming in an iOS app. So, for me, one of the hardest parts about the thinking of protocols is when to use them, how to use them. I've read posts and seen other YouTube's videos that show how to use protocols, but most often, they use it around objects that you might not see in a day-to-day app or in apps that at least that I've used. So I made a small project that takes that goes to the internet, fetches some data, parses it, and you see a table view with the results. and you can go one level further. So we'll have a movies list, and you can choose a movie to get the description. Yeah, that's using the ThinkPad X60 is like the major hit point for what I see from reading, comments when someone posts about protocols and just some of the comments that you see. You don't know exactly how to implement it in your own app. Okay, gaming examples. I've seen like you have two products and they're both buyable, and it's not. It's like they take the example and just. I understand that. Okay, you want to focus on showing the protocol and nothing, and don't distract the reader or the viewer from other issues around the protocols. Just focus on that. But here I said, okay, let's take it a little further and build an app. And the app is something that you do, like most, if not all apps, have this, that you need to go to a server, your own or another server, an API, get the data that from the server. You get most likely a JSON. You parse the JSON. You have a model object, and then you show the array of models. So that's exactly what I did here. So just a few notes. When I started on the project, I used storyboards to get it up and running very fast. But when I wanted to use a dependency injection, um, I found that it was simpler to use programmatic UI. It's not a must, but it helps in separation of concerns. And here to have it, like I'll show you when we get there. Um, okay, there are optimizations that could have been made and shortcuts that I took, again, to get this project up and running very fast and to not have many details that aren't important. So of course you might see something, this could have been implemented another way or better way. I'm fine with that. You can totally disagree with me and have a different opinion or something that works better. But again, I try to focus on a very small project and how to implement protocols. And one of the things, I'll probably make mistakes when we talk about the code, about naming conventions, argument or parameter or function or method. So I'm sorry in advance, but that's um, if you want to correct me, write it down, and hopefully I'll remember next time. Um, so we have a JSON. I didn't set up a YouTube web browser, but it's a basic JSON. We have a URL, sorry, API, the movie database, the movie DB. Um, uh, okay, this is the API. This is the API I will be calling to get data from. Um, it will have basic format, so some general info at the start, and then an array of items that we're interested in displaying. So I created models for each of the elements for the API. So the movie is like the main, the root of the JSON. It has total results and total pages. And of course, the result is an array of movie info, where movie info has many other properties. I just took the title because I want to display it. In the ID, we will need to get the movie page. And all I will get from the movie page is an overview. Again, I'm not even displaying the overview. You'll see it coming up, but it's not shown. Okay. Let's take a quick look at the view controller. Just okay. Simple project. I only have one screen, one view controller. It does everything we need. So it has a table view. It's of course a UI table view controller, subclass of UI table view controller. So I have a table view. I register a cell, generic cell with the use identifier, and then I go to load movies for page 1. Again, I'm not doing any pagination. I'm just taking the first page from the API. Okay, when we load it, we ask the data provider, I'll of course show that class next, to get movies for a page. I send it the page, I get back a completion. The result is a movie, this movie, struct, and of course an error. We do the guard let self equals self as return. We switch on the result type. If it's a success, we get the movies back. We set the local movies array, which I defined here, as the results of the result type of if we got a success back, and we reload the table view. If it's failure, again, simple app project, I'm just printing it to see it. Table view data source and delegate is very simple. Movies count. For the self row, I get IDQ cell with this identifier, get the movie for that index row dot path, and just display in the text label. I display the movie title, return that cell. When we select cell, a minute, okay. And when we select a cell, again, we get the movie from of that index path. We get the ID, and again, for the data provider, we ask to get a movie for a movie page, sorry, like a details page for the movie ID. We get the results back with a movie page or an error, and I just print the movie. Initialize in the scene delegate. This is the way if you're not using storyboards in the scene delegate from iOS 13. Here is where you set up your initial view controller. So it has a window property with a root view controller for the window. The root view controller will be a navigation controller, and the navigation controller's root view controller will be the movies table view controller, and I initialize data provider here. Let's skip a second to the network access. Let's go with fairly simple. Network access is just, it gets the URL and the session, it has a default session to the shared. It just and one method to fetch the data and return a completion. You have the task, data task with the URL that you injected in. It's a standard method for getting a URL or data from a URL with the session. So you get back a data, response, and error. Here I just checked each one. If we have an error, if the response is valid, status code, with guard statements, and if I have a data. All of these are failing, and if all passed, all the guard statements have passed, I sent back a completion with a success and the retrieve data, and I defined a network completion that gets a data and a network error, where the network error can be a network error, response error, or invalid data. Again, don't forget to do resume. Once we get the data, we send it to the parser with initialize with the data and the decoder. Again, standard decoder, generic decoder. I set convert from snake case. It's mostly standard to use this key, and you make a do try catch, and you decode. The decoder does the decode, and you say, okay, it will be of type T that we passed in from the data. Again, if you were able to parse, you send back a success. If not, the failure. Okay, now since most apps follow this flow of sending a URL to the network, getting back the data, parsing it, and then using the object, the model object from the parsed, I created a network data flow class. It's in charge of the flow, getting data from the network and parsing it into a model data. Okay, so this is the main function that gets called from the outside. It's public here. Like if I were to make it, make this into a framework model, this would be the public interface, and it gets a URL and returns the completion. The completion will be a result type with the type that we want to get back. And now the flow is, okay, we call network access, fetch network data with the URL. This calls the network access, where the one we saw with the URL, fetch the data, switch on the result, and go back. Here again we get the result. Here we switch on this result. If it's failure, then if there's an error, we return a failure, and if we got data back, we parse it. And parsing, we initialize the JSON parser with the data. The result type will be after we decode it, and we switch on the parser results. If we have an item, we return completion success with the item. If not, we return a parser error, and this was the network error. We need a dispatch main, because we know here we're returning back to the main queue. Okay, but this is a flow that's prevalent in most, if not every app that you want to go to the network. Make a network request, parse, and get back a model object. But specifically, in my app, I want to get the movies for a page and to get a movie page for a movie ID. So these are the functions that the view controller will call. We create an endpoint. I'll get to that in a bit. And then we have a private a property here for the network data flow where each one is it's the same method, right? But we only want a different URL. So once we get the data for the movies, and here we get the data from the movie page. Okay. Endpoints. I saw John Sundell had a blog post, and actually it was a YouTube video, YouTube clip, um, of how to use endpoints to get the URL. I really like this approach because it breaks it down into the components, and then you can set, if you're working on localhost or a maintenance one or a production one, you can easily set it up here with the host, like change it with configuration or maybe a switch or something like that, and then easily route your data to a different host. Um, so it's the endpoint struct has a path and query items, where the path is, okay, this is the host, right? Let me do it in one line. This is the scheme, this is the host. When you want a movies, this is the path, and these are the query items. We need an API key, we need a language, a page. So there are default query items with the API key and the language. Of course, these we can set in other places like language from the settings, an API key from a constant or server. And the path, we have another extension where each one has a static method that we get back the endpoint with a particular path and query items. So for popular movies, I'll give it a page. It will create the query items like this, page equals 1. This is what is implemented here. And the endpoint itself will return a URL with this path and the query items. Okay, it will check, of course, that it can get a URL from these components and will return the URL. That's what I do here. Okay, create an endpoint and then send it the endpoint URL, which is just the URL because that's what get data needs. Okay, this is the premise of the app. Now, how do you go implement protocols in the app? Let's take a look, like small overview. Oh, well, wait, let's run the app 1 second so you can see it in action. Okay, can everyone see the simulator? Should Shiro, I see your comment. Yes, this video will stay up for all eternity. Okay. No, I always mix up between the simulator on OBS and the actual simulator. Okay, so we have a list of movies. Of course, I'm going to choose Rise of Skywalker, and also with Xcode. Here you can see Xcode will come back. Okay, here you can see that I got back the movie page for the Rise of Skywalker. Okay, now let's hide Xcode for a little bit. It's not showing because it's not on screen. Okay, this is the build of the app. Okay, we have, I'm not sure if my talking and the images I see are like if I'm bringing up something new, if it's synced or not. Probably is. Okay. So we have the main app logic. Okay. This is like the view controllers, mostly the view controllers. Let's say again, this app. It wants a page for start, and then when you have the table view, you want a movie ID. You send that to a specific data provider that like converts the page into an endpoint, as we said, and again the move ID into an endpoint. It's basically a URL, but that's what it's called. That URL is sent to the network data flow. We said the network data flow is the main concept that you want. You have a URL and you just want the parsed data from it. Okay, so that talks to the network access. Of course, this talks to your server, gets back a completion with, let's say, the data here, because that's what we really want. And that data gets passed to the JSON parser, again, returns a result. That results, again, is compartmentalized. Like there's a function here that does all the heavy lifting, and we get a result back. It gets passed to the logic, and we know, okay, we have a success, and we can show the array or the specific page segue to a new view controller, or we show the user the error we got. Now, when you want to implement the protocol, you need to ask what does the main app need to know or have in order to talk to an outside object. Okay, so again, let's say this would have been a modal, sorry, not a model, like a framework. Okay, because you use it all the time, you can separate it to a different project and just have like an API that you're talking to, like a few functions that you're talking to, right? It just needs a URL, doesn't need anything else. A URL, and you know it returns a result. Okay, so this would be a perfect place to implement a protocol, right? Because this network data flow, it just needs a URL and it will return a result. You don't care what happens here. If this was really a third party framework, okay, because you don't want to mess with uh, network logic or whatever, and it even says, okay, I'll give you parsed results back. You just have to make sure that the model is decodable. You could have a third-party framework that it's just one method. Give me a URL and I'll give you back the results. That's the way to think of it. And this is a great place to have a protocol right here. Okay, so that way, that's like the contract basically. Like protocols, that's what it says. Like um, that's like one way to think of it. I want you'll give me a URL and I'll give you a result. You could also have a protocol here, which I'll show you, where the specific data provider, which is specific to the app, like I can't take this out and use it in other apps. No other app, or mostly no other app. Like if it's a weather app, I won't give it a page or a movie ID and get back a result. So this is specific to the app. But again, inside the app, because it's all one app, but you're basically thinking, okay, I'm separating this part, and all you need is your URL, and it'll return me a result. Again, all this needs is a page and a movie ID type, and it will give me back the results. Okay, let's get to how we will implement the protocol. Take this down. Turn Xcode back. No? Okay, just a minute. Okay, Xcode's back. One moment. Set it up here. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is just a little tweak to the endpoints. Again, with all protocols, it just says that my endpoint will need to conform to it, because what I want is for it to bring me back a URL. So here we say protocol and point URL providing. We have a var point URL of type URL. Okay, we say that an object that will conform to this protocol, I want it to bring me back an endpoint URL that it's of type URL. We already have that. You can see it here. Okay, so that's just it. Endpoint URL providing. It will come in handy later on. We'll see how that is implemented. Okay. Now, the main protocol. We said we want this class which takes a URL and returns the result. Here we want to make like the main protocol, right? So protocol network data providing. Okay, that's the protocol. What do we want it to do? We want it to get data. We'll send it type, which is decodable. That's the T. Or data 4, an endpoint URL provider, which conforms to endpoint URL providing. That's, again, just like you could skip this endpoint URL and just continue with, you can disregard this protocol if it's easier. I liked it. You'll see it when we continue. But it could just be a URL here. And completion, escaping, we want result type, or we get back T, or an error, and this returns void. Great. Now, the network flow class needs to conform to this protocol. And I will say it's not conforming. Why? Because we use the URL, but here we want to use the providing. And since we don't have the URL here, we just say that the endpoint URL provider that we sent to you will have an endpoint, because that's what we said here. Any endpoint URL providing will need to have an endpoint URL, which is of type URL. Okay, that's this conformance. And that's why we can use this here. And that's basically the URL. The only thing we also need to add to this class is an init method. You'll see later that we need to init this class elsewhere. You can just call it. Okay, and again, like I said, think of it as a gateway to network calls. Okay, and in order to enter this gateway, you need to conform to this method. Okay, you want a URL endpoint provider or a URL, and you'll get the data back. Okay, now we go to the specific data provider. Okay, and here I want to make another protocol. Since this class gets 2 requests, it will need 2 protocols. So one is movies providing, where we want the movie list, like the full JSON with the array of movie items. This will need a network data flow. One minute. Ah, yes, forgot. Oh. Okay, so in my I didn't name it providing. Let me change that so it doesn't get mixed up with other places. That's the right one. Let me just check something quick. Okay. Because it's like the second or third time I'm writing this code. And I used a different naming the first time. And I want it to be to match up with the ones that I have on GitHub. Okay, I'll get to that later. Okay. It will need let's stop, clean it up. Let's see if I copy it. Okay, great. We'll need to have somewhere to call, right? Someone to call when we want to access the data flow, and a method get movies for page. Okay, here, just a quick note, I saved the same naming of the function, so I don't have to make too much changes because it's already a working project. You may want to change names for better if you want like different concepts or use cases, but since it's already have I already had naming conventions here, I'm not going to change them. So it will be simpler to follow it. Again, completion, escaping. And here we know that we will get back a movie object. Okay. Let's deal with this one for a second. So we have a protocol. Now we want something to conform to this protocol. We'll have a struct, which is a movies provider, which will conform to movies providing. All right. Let's make it add the stubs. Okay, we get this variable that we need to have, so we'll need an init method, right? We'll have network data flow, which is of type network data flow, and our network data flow will be initialized with the one we sent in. And now this method is the one that gets called from the view controller. It wants to get a movies for a page. We need to make an endpoint. An endpoint for popular movies at the page. it needs a string, so we'll turn that into a string. And now we can call the network data flow with the one method it needs, just this one to get the data for an endpoint. Okay, we created this endpoint here, and we can just send the completion back. We don't need to switch because it all happens somewhere else. We know we're getting a movies, and here you can see that this get data will return the type we want. So that's just the completion. Just pass the completion back if you don't have to do anything with it. Okay, that's the first part for the movies. Now we want another one for the specific page. So that be a movie page providing. That's the protocol. Again, we need this network data flow network data obtaining, and the function is get a movie page for movie ID of type string with completion escaping result with a movie page here, because we know this will return a type of movie page, and void. Oh, I missed closing. Oh, it's the protocol. We just define it, and now we create a struct for this one. So it's movie page provider, which conforms to movie page providing. It has a var of net. Great, it even completes all of it. Network data flow type, network data flow self, network data flow show equals. Sorry, a little bit of heat. Okay, and of course we need the method. So it's func get movies for page. Again, we create an endpoint, movie page endpoint, endpoint for movie ID, and network data flow get data for movie endpoint completion. Great. For now, I'll comment this out. Okay, we changed the way the the data provider works. Okay, now we need to change how the view controller talks to it, right? Okay. Let's comment this out for a minute. Here we need to set up these providers. So it's a movies provider, and a movie page. So these are the providers the view controller will talk to in order to get the movies or the list or a specific movie page. Movie page provider. We need to init this movies provider type movies provider and movie page provider type movie page provider self not movies provider equal movies provider and self movie page provider equals movie page provider. Okay, and here we already have a movies provider, and it conforms to a protocol that has the get movies page. So this is movies provider. We ask it for this, we make the call, we ask it for a movies for page, we send in a movie page. That's like how they talk to each other, how they conform, right? The protocol needs to conform. So this is where this comes into play. And here, this is the movie page provider. One more thing, in the scene delegate. We need to change it. Okay, first we need network data flow. That is a network data flow instance. We need to create a movie provider, which is movie provider with this network data flow, and we need a movie page. This is movies page provider, which is movie page provider with the network data flow, and we need a movies table VC, which is initiate movies table view controller with the movie provider and a movie page provider. Let's build it. Let's return simulator. Build failed. Yes. Why? Because it needs the instance, not the class. Movie page provider. Okay. See the simulator. Check that everything Works out. Build success. Oh, sorry, it was just building and I didn't run it. I'll run it now and we'll see. We didn't break anything. Running. Yay. As a Skywalker. Yay. We have the movie info. Okay, so that's the basic premise of implementing the protocol. One thing you can note is that, let's hide the simulator again. Okay, we can erase this. We have duplication here. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing is in the tables view controller, we have two providers. It would be nice if we can consolidate, like make it something more generic. One minute. So the way we do that, again, this is specific to this case. You could have just left it with one protocol for the network flow, and that's a separation you want. Like, you know, the network is something that will be throughout the entire app. You just want to have a protocol that gets to that place. Okay, you get a URL or URL provider, endpoint URL provider, and you get back the results. But if you do go the route of using this protocol too, it would be nice to have it a little better structure. So let's do that. We'll have a protocol for data providing. There's a way I saw in Sean Allen's video where you can have it spell check. I'll do that later. In this protocol, we'll have okay, so I think I messed up. I have two namings in the first. There's like 3 branches in my GitHub for the starting point, the first phase and the second phase, and I think my naming is off between them. The naming is not so important. It does play a part in how naming protocols work. So for one, I ditch the name. I replace the name network data flow with network data obtainer. Like, okay, I want the network data, and this is the one that obtains it. If you're looking at it, all the branches, then it might be a little problematic. Like, you'd have to make some adjustment between them. I'll fix it later, of course. So we have this main protocol, which every instance that wants some data will need to use this protocol. So this is like the main protocol that screen or a view model, view controller will ask when they need to get data from the network. Okay, this is like a general one, the main one. But now we want this protocol for movies providing to conform to the data providing one. And it doesn't need this anymore. Okay, so some instance like your view controller that wants movies will just need to call this protocol, and because this method on this protocol, and because it conforms to the main protocol, we already have a network data flow which we know wants a URL and returns back a result. So this is for the movies. Okay, and now okay, let's put all the protocols up top. So we have a protocol. It will, okay, so I'll copy it so Xcode won't scream at me that I have a new instance. Okay, and this is the movie page. Just get the movie for a movie page for a movie ID. Okay, and now we need a struct. Now I'm thinking I could have maybe done it with an extension. Let's keep it this way. I'll mess with it later. Provider, which conforms to the data providing. It has a network and we just init it with the network data flow of type network data flow and set it. Great. And now, okay, now we have an extension on the data provider that conforms to movies providing, and here we have the func get movies for page. We create an endpoint equals endpoint with popular movies at this page. It's a string. Again, this could have been maybe done somewhere else. And because we're conforming to the data provider, we have the network data flow, and we get for this endpoint. And we want the completion. And we don't need this one anymore. And we make another extension on the data provider, which is movie page providing. Yes, movie page providing. We get the function or method we need to implement. We make movie page endpoint, which is an endpoint with movie or movie ID. And of course, we need a network to get data for movie page endpoint and the completion. And we don't need this one anymore. So again, we have one main protocol that just takes a network data flow object. We initialize it here. We have two protocols. This needs to conform to the data providing. Two specific protocols, one for getting movies for a page, and one for getting a movie page. This is the detail, and this is like a movie list, but it's paginated, so that's why it's for a page. And then an extension for the protocol, which again conforms to each specific protocols, where we make the endpoint and we call the network for the data, and we want to get the data for an endpoint. Now we have to go and change the view controller, right? Because instead of having these two, we'll return this one. So we init the data provider. That is a data provider, sorry, not conforms. And self data provider equals data provider. Great. And because the data provider has an extension, of data provider for movies providing, we can call this method here. You just need one data provider for the movies, and on the data provider we can get the movie page. We need to update the scene delegate. It has a network data flow. With it, we initialize a data provider, data provider with a network flow object, and we initialize movies table VC, which is movies table view controller with right, we change that. with the one data provider. Let's build. Anyone hear my audio? I see it on OBS. Just no way to know if it's going to YouTube. Oh, sorry. I always forget to run it. We run. We see the list. We see the Rise of Skywalker. Yes. I hope. Oh no. Let me quickly check if I can hear myself on YouTube. If anyone can hear me, that's about it. Okay, so I think it's your PC ThinkPad X60 because I can hear myself on the YouTube. So I'm writing and I'm asking. No, my mic is not not on mute. Not on mute. I can hear. I can hear me on YouTube. Hey, can hear me on YouTube. So, let's see if I have anything else I wanted to talk about. Again, naming. There is a convention. Um, um, so that's why protocols are like providing, and the implementation, the concrete implementation, is a provider. Could be obtaining an obtainer, like here. So I think that's about it. If you want to see a specific topic, you can comment here. I'll try to work something up. And that's about it. Thank you, and hope you get to use protocols in your own apps. It's challenging, but fun. Where the protocol should be declared, like you talking about um, here, where you set the declaration. Um, I haven't had too much experience. Again, I'm also fairly new to implementing protocols, but probably in the file, right? So it could be a struct, could be a class, but the one that's going to implement it. Okay, you don't want to have, or maybe like a file in the same group. Okay, so it could have had, again, this could have been split up, like this file, the network data flow, the parsing, and the access could have been in one group and separated, because this file is not, it's generic, it's not specific to this application. It could be in any application. So that file, along with these two, could have been in a separate group, and then have a file where inside you would declare the protocol. I hope that's what you're talking about. Okay, audio's back. That's good. Did you manage to hear my answer about when should did commented? Ah, okay, so you heard it. So again, we said, I'll bring back the picture. Okay, we said that this part is generic for like most apps, right? So you would put all the files that are relevant to this part in one group, and then have another file with the protocol for it. Okay, so network access, JSON parser, and data flow in one group. You could separate it again inside two different groups, but and then a protocol. If it's too much like files, then okay, the protocol could be in the same file as the main call, like the public um, method that you call. Well, that's it. That's where you would define it. Okay, thanks again. Hope you all stay safe, and hope I'll continue doing this. Bye.